Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next session in our Retail Strategy and Planning series, Moving Beyond BOPIS Basics by Expanding Fulfillment Options. I'm Adam Blair, the editor of Retail Touchpoints, and I'll be moderating today's session. While BOPIS is proving popular with consumers, many of the initial deployments are not fully meeting customer expectations, and they can create additional work, costs, and complexity if they're not tightly integrated into the store's operations. Expanded fulfillment options, such as automated lockers, can address both of these challenges. And during this webinar, you'll learn more about how retailers should be planning for the future of BOPIS, and also about how new fulfillment options can provide retailers with the flexibility to handle higher order volumes, a wider range of package sizes and types, and also consumers' desire for both convenience and security. For those of you who may be new to Retail Touchpoints, here's a quick overview. We're an all-digital media company publishing 2 weekly online newsletters, daily news, special reports, and multimedia presentations. If you haven't done so already, I encourage you to subscribe to our weekly newsletter. We welcome input and feedback through phone, email, and also social media, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Our website address is www.retailtouchpoints.com. Retail Touchpoints also hosts live events, including our popular Retail Innovation Conference. You can visit the website shown on this slide to sign up for updates and reminders about the dates and venue for the 2020 conference. Throughout the entire Retail Strategy and Planning series, you'll also have the opportunity to win some great prizes via the prize pack. You can enter by registering for sessions, as well as sharing your take on social media using the hashtag RSP19. Prizes include Starbucks gift cards, as well as free passes to our live events. Today's presentation, we're using the On24 platform. Right now, you should be viewing the On24 dashboard, which shows the live viewing screen. By clicking on the Questions widget on the right-hand side of the screen, you can type in questions during the live presentation and press Submit. You can also find a widget named Resources under Questions. Here you can download assets our presenters have provided. All you have to do is click on the resource, and it will automatically download. Today's session is slated to last about 30 to 40 minutes with time for live questions at the end. We'll get to as many questions as we can, and if we don't get to yours, we'll pass it along to the speaker. Also, today's session is being recorded, and all attendees will receive an archive link to the presentation to go back and review or share with their colleagues. Today is Penny Lassiter, the Senior Product Manager for Retail Automated Lockers at Package Concierge. She oversees business and product development. Penny leads the software and hardware innovation efforts to address the specific needs of the dynamic retail environment. Prior to joining Package Concierge, Penny spent the majority of her career in the consumer products business and product development for global brands that included Coleman Outdoor Equipment, Bell Helmets, and Mattel Toys. Welcome, Penny.
Thank you so much, and thank you guys all for joining us today. We've got a pretty meaty subject to talk about. BOPIS is certainly the hot topic, the hot word in the industry, and today we're really going to focus on how we can refine BOPIS by expanding fulfillment options. Before I get into the meat of the presentation, I want to kind of draw a little picture in your head. So, you know, you get to work at 8:30 in the morning and you sit down at your desk and you remember that you need to order something, right? So you go online. I know I'm an e-commerce shopper. I go online and order it, and I'm going to pick it up in store. And I expect that to be a quick experience because I've got lunch plans, and I need to run my errand and go to lunch all at the same time. So I place my order, noon comes, I'm going to run to the store before I go to lunch. So I go to the store, I walk in, a couple scenarios. Let's say in this first scenario, I go to the BOPIS or the customer service desk, right, and there's a long line, which is kind of annoying to me, and there's one person behind the counter. And every time that person has to help somebody, they get the person's information and they disappear off someplace that I can't see. Maybe they come back with an order, maybe they come back because they need more information. But my kind of angst is building, right, because that's taking a long time. So that's one way that BOPIS can manifest itself in a store. The other option is, let's say I walk in, again, I'm going to pick up my order, need to go to lunch, and I walk to the BOPIS desk and there's nobody there, right? I have to look around and find somebody so that I can get my order that I've already bought and paid for, and I find somebody, but they're not a BOPIS person, so they have to find somebody else. And the saga continues. So really, that's an everyday occurrence in a lot of retail stores, and we as consumers want options. So what we're going to really talk about today is what are some of those options and how can fulfillment options benefit both the retailer and the consumer. We'll talk about the history of lockers, and we'll end with some interesting locker trends and talk about some tips to help you get started if you do want to do a proof of concept for lockers. I'll start with the numbers, and the numbers, frankly, are a little bit staggering. Retail growth may be slower than what we'd like to see, but e-commerce growth is really what is driving overall retail growth, and that's expected to continue in the low double digits for the foreseeable future. And one thing about an e-commerce order is that it is 3 to 5 times more expensive to fulfill an e-commerce order, especially with home delivery, than it is to fulfill or to have a standard brick-and-mortar purchase. So what this really tells us from a retail standpoint is that e-commerce growth is driving the retail business. It's not going to change anytime soon, and as those orders keep coming, retailers need to find a way to fulfill the orders in a cost-effective way for them, and also at the same time keep the consumers happy. There's some research on this particular subject. I thought this was especially interesting, that a research study asked retailers if omni-channel fulfillment strategy was a priority. And a startlingly high 94% said that fulfillment strategy is one of the highest priorities. I guess it wouldn't be surprising because the growth in terms of order volume is there, and the pressure on expenses is there to fulfill. So that makes sense. At the same time, they're also saying that BOPIS will become a default delivery method, right? So 86% of people see BOPIS as, I don't know that it'll ever overtake home delivery, but it will certainly become a default delivery method in any retailer's arsenal. And more information on, just the growth around BOPIS, and that is 90% of retailers say they plan to implement BOPIS by 2021. And, that's only a couple of years away. Right now, depending on the research you read, it's 60 to 75% of, thriving and robust retailers have BOPIS. But I think what we can say with a high degree of certainty is that most retailers either have it or are considering it. And this next statistic was really interesting to me, and it says that by 2025, 10% of all retail orders will be filled via click and collect or BOPIS. And I thought, well, what does that actually mean? The number is so big, it's actually hard to comprehend. I did a couple of calculations, and that's $450 billion worth of orders fulfilled via BOPIS. So I don't know how many exact orders that is, but what that tells us is that's a lot of orders, that's a lot of packages. BOPIS is a primary fulfillment option, and we need to find a way to make sure that stores can manage that expected growth. And so we're very clear, the research is very clear on what we as consumers want. So not only do I work in the retail industry, but I'm a consumer as well. And so we're going to talk about 3 things that consumers want: fast, free, and easy, right? So from a fast perspective, Amazon taught us over the last 2 years, they raised our expectation to 2 days. But our expectation has even been raised further, whereas now we expect it within the same day. What BOPIS can do for us is we don't have to wait a couple days to get it to our home. We can go to the store and get it. The expectation is generally within the same day, and some people expect it within an hour or 2. There are some retailers out there that have that BOPIS fulfillment promise. But regardless, I want it fast and I want it friction-free. I want to walk in and out because I got to get to Chipotle for my lunch date that I talked about earlier. Free. I'm guilty of this. I'm allergic to any shipping charge. If I get into a situation on a site and it looks like that I'm going to have to pay shipping, I'm one of those consumers that, a retailer can't stand because I'll abandon my cart. But the research shows that that's really the way we all feel. We don't want to pay for shipping. And one of the things that BOPIS does is BOPIS eliminates the shipping charge for the consumer. It also so happens to benefit the retailer because it costs less to fulfill that order. And then finally, easy. I want it to be easy. I want the location of the pickup desk to be easy to find. I don't want to have to wait. I don't want to have a back order or a canceled item. It goes back to that frictionless experience. So when I look at this from a research perspective and from a consumer perspective, I can't separate out these three for me. They're all equally important, and I'm one of those consumers with high expectations in this area. Adam, you're a consumer, I assume, out there in the marketplace. Does one of these specifically resonate with you?
Well, I definitely am a consumer, although maybe not a typical one, and particularly for somebody who writes about retail, this is shameful to admit, but I'm not a huge shopper person. But I would say easy would be my important one. But by easy, I mean, there's an option to do it the way that I need it done. So friction-free in that sense is important to me. I'm less concerned with fast and free, but that's more nature of the kinds of things that I buy.
Yeah, I think that, you talked about you want it how you want it. And we're going to deal with that in a couple of slides when we talk about there isn't just one fulfillment option that I think is going to work for retail. What the market's saying and what consumers are saying is it's a variety of fulfillment options.
Yeah, I would agree.
So let's talk about the current BOPIS fulfillment experience. We talked about it a little bit in my, my introduction when I ordered at work and I went to pick it up at lunch. How BOPIS is manifesting itself at retail now is generally, it can take away from other customer-centric activities. So that means I've already bought and paid for my order as a BOPIS consumer. I am a store associate and I'm helping that person with the BOPIS order. That means I might not be available to help that person that came into the store and actually needs my assistance to make a purchase decision or find something. Fulfilling BOPIS in a traditional way is not ideal from a customer-centric activity. Also, we find, and this is anecdotal, and there's some qualitative research that shows this too, poorly trained associates make for longer wait times. The labor process for the multiple touches that it takes to fulfill a BOPIS order, it averages 5 steps or 5 to 7 minutes. There's an expense associated with that. And then there's infrastructure challenges. And I thought something that really stood out to me was that on Black Friday of 2018, some research reported that 32% of all BOPIS orders experience a canceled, incorrect, or damaged item, right? So as much as we as consumers like BOPIS, and it has its advantages, it also has advantages for retailers, but it has some challenges as well. And if we flip and look at that from the consumer side, as a consumer, here's some of our challenges. Well, we walk in the store and the pickup location is hard to find. It may not be staffed adequately in the example I talked about earlier. And this one's a real killer for me. Some research shows that an average wait time is 7.2 minutes. Call me impatient. If I had to wait in line for something that I'd bought and paid for 7.2 minutes, I would not be using that service at that retailer again. And then a cumbersome process, right? If you have to, any friction within that process. And then this can be a killer from a retailer brand perspective, is an inconsistent experience. I go one time and I wait a minute and I have a great associate and I love it. The next time I go, I wait 7.2 minutes and I have someone that's not properly trained. So that inconsistency of experience, can really affect the overall outcome. And what we find, or what the research shows from a fulfillment expectation, we know fast, free, and easy, but then it's not only that, it's multiple fulfillment options, right? I want it when I want it, how I want it, the way I want it. So this was surprising to me, 76% of people in this particular research study said that having multiple fulfillment options influences their willingness to complete a purchase. And retailers are taking note. This next slide, we'll talk about the choices that are out there for fulfillment options. So we have the traditional retail experience, right? The standard checkout, the self-checkout, the scan and go. I personally use scan and go at my local grocery store. And that's a more traditional retail experience. Then from an e-commerce experience, we have ship to home. And again, those ship to home orders, although they're great and convenient, for the retailer, they're very expensive. And again, remember, we don't want to pay the shipping on that, even though it costs the retailer more. So what omnichannel has really done for us, and BOPIS has done for us, is it's introduced, both from a retail and consumer perspective, multiple new fulfillment options. I have a total of 8 on this page, but there's probably more fulfillment options that I haven't captured. The standard BOPIS experience really started out with the customer service pickup. Also, you have retailers that use courier delivery. So I've bought it online, and I don't want to come to the store to pick it up, so a retailer can offer to have a courier to deliver it to my home in the same day. Curbside pickup, that's a very prominent thing in the grocery industry. And then what we're really going to spend the rest of our time talking about today is something near and dear to my heart, and that is using automated lockers as a BOPIS fulfillment solution. It might be interesting to get a little bit of the history of automated lockers. So automated lockers are used pretty robustly in Europe, but it's only been since about 2010 that we really started to see it here in the United States. And that was initiated by the U.S. Postal Service. I actually worked for the company that partnered with the U.S. Postal Service to introduce postal lockers in the United States, and it was called the GoPost. And you can still find GoPost out there in multiple locations, primarily on the East Coast. And that morphed into utilizing lockers for multifamily. Amazon introduced their lockers, and then in the university environment. So if you imagine in the multifamily environment, let's say you have an apartment complex that has 200 apartments, and can you imagine the amount of packages that that property manager gets? Multifamily was probably really the first industry to wholeheartedly embrace automated lockers because it solves the package management problem that property managers experience. In 2013-14, you started to see the carriers get into the automated locker business, so you can find UPS and FedEx lockers out in the market widely. And I think since 17, we've entered a period that I just call lockers as a solution, which included the entry of retail into the usage of automated lockers, but for other uses as well. Corporate environments, healthcare environments. Now, lockers are a more ubiquitous way to transfer things from one point to another. Regarding retail specifically, there's 3 retailers that have made a very visible statement regarding lockers being a clear and important part of their fulfillment strategy. Home Depot, Walmart, and Amazon, and you see some sample pictures there on the slide. But down below I've listed some other retailers, and this is just a sampling of other retailers that to some degree are doing a proof of concept. That could be 1 or 2, 5 stores, that could be 20 stores. They haven't rolled out as widely as Home Depot, Walmart, and Amazon, but they are still have lockers in the market that they are testing. And there's probably 10 to 15 more retailers that I personally know of that are in some form or fashion getting ready to do a proof of concept. So we feel like that we're nearing a tipping point in the retail market for the acceptance of locker usage. When we think of the advantages to the retailer, additional fulfillment option is important because we know that's what consumers want. But, this is an expense. It takes up space in the store. The retailer is paying for it. So it has to have some real quantifiable benefits from an ROI perspective. It definitely reduces the time and touches that a retail associate has to spend on fulfilling a BOPIS order. With the locker scenario, they pick it, pack it, put it in the locker, and they're done, and they can be on to another activity. There's no staffing a counter. There's no depositing the order in a storage room and then picking it back up. So it automates the process. And it standardizes the customer experience. So that's great for me as a customer and you as a customer, but it's great for the retailer as well, that consistent experience. And then there's the add-on sales opportunity. Research shows, and this can vary widely, but this particular source shows that 75% of shoppers who use BOPIS are likely to make an additional purchase when they come into the store. If you have a great BOPIS experience fulfilled by a locker because you didn't have to wait in line, it only took you 20 to 30 seconds to execute, you've got more time and propensity to say, hey, I'm going to stay and I'm going to do a little more shopping. There's some clear advantages for the retailer. The consumer, the advantage for us is it's fast, free, and easy, right? It's a three-step process. The retailer sends the consumer an email that says your order is ready to pick up. It has a barcode or a PIN code in it. Consumer goes to the locker, scans that code, the door opens, and they're ready to go. It literally takes 15 to 20 seconds. So when you contrast that with the research that said the average wait time is 7.2 minutes in line, you can see a real clear advantage from a consumer perspective. Further supported with some customer satisfaction information that we track. We have a rating of customer satisfaction that shows 9.5 on a 10-point scale of the overall locker experience. And for those of you who use NPS, and if that's a meaningful number to you, locker transactions have an NPS score of 88, which is a fantastic score and shows that people like using lockers where they're offered. Next slide really provides some additional insight into that, and I think it's really interesting. The first element here shows the number of people that have used a locker system before. And when we started tracking this, that number was more down around the 12, 13%. So it's creeping up as locker usage becomes more commonplace. But so of all the people that are using lockers, only 21% of them have used them before. But conversely, 92% of those people say that that locker experience was faster than the traditional experience. So even though they hadn't used it before, it was new to them, it was still a better experience than something they were used to. And then also tellingly, 92% said they would use a locker again. So when we look at this and we talk to retailers and they say, gosh, we're not sure, maybe our customer base isn't tech savvy or we don't know what adoption will be, what this shows us is that the experience for the consumer is intuitive enough that even if they've never used it, over 90% of them found it easier than what you're currently offering and would do it again. So let's talk about some trends in retail from a locker perspective. Over the last 120 days or so, we've had the opportunity to talk to probably 28 to 30 enterprise-level retailers. And so this is kind of a compilation of some of the things that we're hearing that may be beneficial to you. Everybody recognizes that locker usage is, we think, at a tipping point. It's becoming more ubiquitous. From what's happening in multifamily, again, the first industry that really adopted lockers, there's probably over 3,500 multifamily systems around the United States where lockers are being used. So people are used to them from that perspective. And then you've got Walmart, Home Depot, and Amazon going big with lockers. Almost without exception, the first questions that we ask a retailer, what are your goals for the system? And two things consistently pop up, right? Retailers need operational efficiency, quantifiable, ROI gains from that perspective, but they also want customer satisfaction improvement. And it's kind of like that fast, free, or easy question, which is more important? I ask, is there one of those that outweighs the other? And the answer is generally, it's kind of 100 and 100. We've got to have operational efficiency improvements, and we've got to have improved customer satisfaction to refine our BOPIS experience. Retailers are wanting to start with lockers. So the early adopters from the BOPIS process, or from BOPIS fulfillment, started with customer service desk. And then as it grew, they maybe morphed to a specific BOPIS pickup desk. And now they're morphing to curbside and lockers and other things. Some of the later adopters in BOPIS are saying, you know what, we've seen what's happened out there in the market, and we're not going to wait to do lockers. We want to start with more fulfillment options at the beginning. Conversely, they want a quick and easy pilot. If you're a retailer out there listening to the webinar today and you have multiple stores that you don't want a proof of concept and you just want to roll out, I'd love to talk to you. But the truth is, I think that that's kind of a unicorn scenario and doesn't exist. Every retailer really wants to be able to pilot a proof of concept for this, but they need to make that quick and easy because there's a lot of things on that roadmap that are competing for time and resources. Another thing that's happening is the retailers that went out early and before maybe consumer acceptance was there or they had thought through the process themselves are coming back and saying, you know what, we did our initial pilot, but now there's some things we want to pivot on and reevaluate, and so we're looking at some other options. A great example of that would be most of the early locker pilots that you saw and implementations that you saw were inside lockers. But for the ultimate in consumer convenience, what if you put a locker outside? It extends your store hours. It allows the consumer to pick up whenever they want. And so, you know, retailers are going back and considering what are the other options. Certainly, they want easy integration, generally with the order management system, but definitely with whatever existing retail systems they're utilizing in that BOPIS process. You know, the lockers are competing in the omni-channel space for resources with a lot of other priority projects. So we really have to, you know, get clear on what your goals are so that you can show a high ROI. And then this is, I think, a really important one, marketing tactics to facilitate add-on purchases. So as a consumer, I'll give a shout out to Macy's. I had an instance where I ordered something from Macy's, and because, you know, it's my business, I obviously used the locker, and I was thrilled and delighted when I opened it up, and with my purchase, they had given me a 20% off coupon to shop at Macy's that next day. Now, I don't know whether I would or wouldn't have stayed otherwise, but I can tell you I definitely stayed. I definitely used my coupon, and I spent more. And I think that that's a common scenario with most consumers. So being innovative and thinking about how you can incent those add-on purchases is part of the locker discussion that we have. And then finally, and probably most importantly, is flexibility around what we're calling future-proofing. And that is the retail market is incredibly dynamic right now. There's a lot changing. So what is going to happen in 6 months? We might be able to forecast that collectively, right? What's going to happen in 5 years? We don't know. But lockers are an investment. So the flexibility when you're selecting a locker system, retailers are asking, we want the flexibility in installation location, inside, outside. Our market mix or the order mix may change over the course of our locker usage. We want flexibility around the size of the compartment, the number of compartments in a system. So that's really important. And then finally, multiple use cases. When lockers were originally used, especially in the U.S. retail market, it was for fulfillment of BOPIS, a buy online, pick up in store order. So it was a locker purchase that had one job. Without exception now, what we're seeing is a really interesting trend, and that is lockers for multiple use cases. So that locker, it costs money, it takes up space, and so what retailers are really looking for now is what other jobs can that locker do? What other problems can it solve for me in my business to make it more valuable? It really helps that ROI story. BOPIS, obviously, BORIS, right? Buy online, return in store. There's actually a higher percentage of retailers that currently offer return in store of online orders than offer BOPIS. So using lockers to facilitate returns. Store-to-store inventory transfers. I thought that was a really interesting use case. You know, we do a kind of a discovery process when we first meet with the retailer and talk through all the things that kind of happen in the store, and it's amazing the other things you can find that lockers could be good for. Store-to-store transfers are one. Courier pickup, for instance, with auto parts. I won't go through all of these. They're pretty self-explanatory, but a couple that I think are really interesting. Ship-to-store orders, right, whether that is ship-to-store from a carrier or from your fleet, those ship-to-store orders can go directly into a locker. A pop-up or a temporary location. Brilliant marketing move by Amazon this summer. They deployed Amazon lockers at Coachella. So you could order something on Amazon, and if you went to Coachella, I personally did not go, but you could pick up your order there at an Amazon locker. So I think pop-up and temporary lockers we're going to start to see a lot of. There's some really interesting things that could happen around that. And then another one that we're starting to hear more about is locker as a retail storefront. There's a couple of things around that. One is, you know what, we know there's store consolidation. And there's research that shows that if a retailer closes a brick and mortar store in a certain zip code, their overall business, obviously, in that zip code goes down, even with e-commerce. The retailers are starting to say, what if we put a locker in that zip code that was branded, and that became our locker as a storefront? It's a really interesting use case. Another one is something that I, had never thought of, but with the discovery with the retailer came up, is they were going to close the store for a period of time for extensive remodeling, but they wanted to have a presence in that location, and they were wondering, gosh, could we use a locker to be our storefront during that remodel? So you see some other things there, but I think the key is to know that their lockers can do more jobs and solve more problems so that they can be more valuable in your overall operation. And when we think about next steps for lockers, there's a couple of key things. Some of them are common sense, but I think that, it's worth mentioning. And that is identifying your current BOPIS pain points. So if you're fulfilling BOPIS and you're not using lockers now, taking a hard look at where those pain points are at can help you really identify quantifiably how lockers can benefit your organization. I think a big one that we run into a lot with retailers is that internal agreement on the top 1 or 2 goals for using lockers. What we see almost without exception is that lockers are a decision that involves multiple departments, so there's multiple stakeholders. I was in a meeting recently, there was probably 10 or 12 retail people there and 4 or 5 departments represented. And everybody has not competing, but certainly maybe different goals. So to start that locker project with a cross-functional team understanding, if here's what the overall goals are, I think will make the project a lot more successful. And then brainstorming alternate use cases from your specific retail point of view. Not everybody's going to have store-to-store inventory transfers, but if you do that, lockers can help. So having that brainstorm up front. And then if you currently execute BOPIS, analyzing the data. When we talk about future-proofing the system, you want a system that's going to be able to grow with you and meet your needs, right? And so you need to look at what's the order size, meaning the dimensions of your BOPIS orders now. What that will help the locker supplier do, your locker partner, is figure out the mix of compartment sizes that you need. And then the order volume. How many orders are you getting in that location a day? So that tells you, again, helps us figure out the overall size of the system that you need. And then determining installation location. Do you want it front of store, back of store, out in the parking lot? I think that the one thing that can be ruled out pretty specifically is that retailers are going away from back of store, right? If it's about fast, free, and easy, don't make me walk to the back of the store. But that installation location discussion, I think, is something that retailers need to have internally. And then to be really honest internally about the available resources you have to execute the proof of concept. We try to go as far as we can to make it a frictionless experience to execute that proof of concept. But we talk to a lot of retailers that the cross-functional team, let's say they have agreed on the goals and they're ready to execute, but there's some key component in that that's roadmap is full and they don't have what's needed, and so that throws a wrench in things. So I think to determine those resources and make sure they're available up front is important. And then determine KPIs. It's amazing. BOPIS is hot. Lockers are getting hot. And so people want to start. We got to get going. We got to get going before holiday 2019. In fact, let's get it out there and see what happens. Without those KPIs and those benchmarks, it's really not as useful of a test as it could be. So I want to thank you for your time. Hopefully this was a really beneficial session for you, and we were able to convey some information that you can use very tactically to help make a decision for your particular retail situation regarding locker usage. And now I'll turn it over to Adam.
Well, thanks, Penny. Great presentation. Lots of good information about BOPIS in general and how lockers can fit in. I thought the stuff about all the multiple use cases was also great. We did get some questions from the audience, so if you're ready, we'll just dive into those.
Sure.
The first one is, what's the biggest challenge you've seen retailers encounter in implementing lockers for BOPIS fulfillment?
You know, I think it's something that I just mentioned on one of those, I think the last slide, and that is having clearly defined KPIs. So I think, you know, retailers, they see other people using it, they see what's happening with BOPIS, they know that their BOPIS business is going to grow, and they need to refine the process, and they're excited about the advantages that lockers can bring. So let's just get it out there and see what happens. And I think that doesn't provide the best experience. Having at least a couple of KPIs determined as a benchmark before you put it out there in the wild, so to speak, is a better scenario for everybody and allows the retailer to make a decision based on you know, factual information.
Mm-hmm. Well, and here's another question that refers to KPIs. What are some common KPIs to measure locker success?
You know what, it depends on the retailer and what their goals are, but some general ones that we see are a benchmark on customer satisfaction. Store A, prior to lockers, customer satisfaction score was X. We want to get it up, you know, X number of points to Y, and so measuring that customer satisfaction score, whether that's on a, you know, a 10-point scale or an NPS, like I talked about in the presentation. Also measuring add-on sales. I think this is hard depending on the technology that the retailer is utilizing, but many retailers are able to tie add-on sales. So I came in and I did BOPIS pickup, and did I also, you know, maybe it's through your customer loyalty card, did I also make another purchase at the same time? That's an important measure. And then increase in number of BOPIS orders. So the thought process is, if you make the consistent more experience, you know, you address fast, free, and easy for the consumer, your retail location should see more BOPIS orders as your repeat customers are brand loyal and they have a great experience. So what was the benchmark before you put in lockers, and then how has that changed since you've used lockers? So I think those are important things to consider.
Yeah, those sound like they make a lot of sense, absolutely. Here's another question. Have retailers you work with expressed concern about lockers causing them to lose contact with the customer? I guess that might be an issue if the lockers are located outside, or if they're so far in front of the store people aren't in. But is that something people have asked questions about?
Yeah, that is something that people have asked questions about, and it really comes up whether the locker is going to be inside the store or even outside the store, because the retailer thinks, well, you know, I'm not going to have an associate that's actually going to, you know, come in contact with the consumer. I was actually in a retail meeting in July. It was a room, I think it was 8 people. There was probably 3 or 4 groups, departments represented, and there was a divide. There was the group that said, you know what, we need to do this. This is the future. And there was the group that said, no, we want to maintain contact with our customers. And so they asked for, you know, what from your vantage point would you say about this? And so I think it's a kind of an easy question to ask, because here's what consumers say. I want it fast, free, and easy. So you look at your current experience where you have contact with the consumer. Do they perceive that to be fast, free, and easy? The research shows that they don't. Do they perceive lockers to be fast, free, and easy? The answer is yes. So it's not so much about what we want. We want to continue to talk to the consumer, but if the consumer doesn't want to talk to us, they want fast, free, and easy, you kind of have to follow the data from that perspective. And then the other point is more anecdotal. You know, and the other point is more anecdotal in that if I go in and I have 10 great BOPIS experiences, I'm brand loyalty. My customer lifetime value just went up. And when I really need to talk to you, I'm going to go back in the store and go to the customer service desk. So you're not going to lose contact with me. You're actually going to make me happier in the long run. So in the instance that I described in July, after we left, they went back and did some, you know, internal discussions, and they came out on the side of, you know what, we'll follow the data, and here's what the data says. So let's do this as a proof of concept. But I think it's certainly a question that almost without exception every retailer asks themselves before they embark on the locker journey.
Right, and the point, it sounds like the point you're making is, if you can maintain contact, but if the process is not good for the consumer, the contact is wasted. In fact, it's probably worse than no contact at all, I would imagine, if they have a bad BOPIS experience versus, exactly. a good one or a neutral one. All right. I think we have time for just one more question. If we do implement a proof of concept pilot for lockers, how many locations do you recommend? I guess that would depend on the size of the retailer, but do you have a recommendation for retailers?
Generally, we say that a minimum of 2 per installation site. So what I mean by that, if you say, you know what, we have no interest in doing lockers outside for whatever reasons. We're only going to do inside. We say, well, if you're going to do inside, at least do a minimum of 2. I would say most retailers, so you have something to compare and contrast. I would say most retailers do more than that, 3 to 5, but a minimum of 2. If you're trying to decide, do we want to do indoor or outdoor, then I think it's 2 per installation location. So pick 2 sites for indoor, 2 sites for outdoor, get your KPIs, aligned, get your team aligned, and then you're testing a minimum of 4 lockers in 2 install sites. Again, most of the retailers that we've seen and what's out there in the market are more locations than that, but I think that you can get the information that you need if you plan the proof of concept up front with as few as 2 to 4 locations.
Okay, great. Penny, thanks again for the great insights and the answers to the questions. I think this is an interesting area. As you said, BOPIS is very hot, and I think people are looking at ways to make it even better, both for the retailer and the consumer. But unfortunately, we're out of time for today. For the attendees, you can register for any of the other sessions at the Retail Strategy and Planning Series via the website that's listed at the bottom of this slide. Our next session is going to begin at 2 p.m. Eastern today, and that will be New Rules for Retail Supply Chain Success, Align Last Mile and Top-Notch Customer Service. But for now, thanks everybody and have a great day.